Speak of the devil, and it shall appear.
What the hell is going on?
Our plan is proceeding as expected.
Oh, really? Do I look like I'm running
Call of Duty.
right now? You're hit on the
Acquisition.
It didn't work, my friend.
Leave us.
No, you stay here. I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?
I've paid you a small fortune.
This gives you power over me?
There's no other way to say it, let's face it. Sony f***ed around and they found out. And here I thought 2023 was supposed to be Sony's year. But after witnessing their abysmal port of The Last of Us remake on PC, I'm starting to think it really is Sony's year, just not the type of year they want. You can tell they're putting all of their resources into trying to stop the acquisition of Activision. And as a result, their brand is suffering. I don't believe in karma, I believe this is just the results of Sony's incompetence. Jim Ryan's approach to the CMA has clearly come back to bite him in the ass. While other trade commissions have been approving of this acquisition, Sony has been stuck with the EU regulators and trying to convince them for several months, wasting everybody's goddamn time. Well, I mean, I say a waste of time, but it's been entertaining as hell. If you've been watching it on this channel anyway. Daddy Fred has a habit of exaggerating things. Well, that's fine, because Jim Ryan has clearly exaggerated his concerns. He's quickly become the Karen of video game CEOs.
And if you want to keep coming here and bugging me, then I would like to speak to your manager, because you are harassing me, and I am important.
It's clear to see where the toxic, entitled behavior of PlayStation fanboys comes from. They learn from Daddy Jim Ryan. With the amount of PS5s flying off the shelves, now is not the time to be slacking off. Jim Ryan's priorities are seriously messed up right now, because it seems this acquisition is most certainly gonna pass, and any minute spent trying to stop it has been a fruitless endeavor. As a matter of fact, I'd argue it's had the complete opposite effect, and is doing more harm to Sony than good. Japan's Fair Trade Commission has cleared Microsoft's Activision Blizzard acquisition. Jesus Christ, would you look at that? Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Chile, Serbia, and now Japan. I mean, Japan should have been the obvious one. That's the country where the Xbox practically barely even exists. My jaw would have dropped if Japan denied this acquisition. Any and all competition for Xbox and PlayStation is most welcome there, because even with Activision Blizzard under their belt, I highly doubt the Xbox stands a chance in that country. So this one was a no-brainer.
Superior Japanese engineering.
Now, nobody's surprised about this. Xbox's numbers in Japan are practically non-existent. You have a higher chance of succeeding with cryptocurrency than you do finding somebody who plays on Xbox in that country. So honestly, it's not big news, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. Why do you think Sony didn't fly out to any other regulator? Why do you think they only flew out to the UK? And for all that valiant effort they put forward, they didn't even put a dent in the acquisition or slow it down. In fact, the complete opposite has now just happened, because in an attempt to get Microsoft investigated, Sony themselves have now come under scrutiny.
11 members of Congress argue Sony is unfairly running Xbox in Japan. Members of Congress from both sides of the aisle are pressing the Biden administration to take action on PlayStation Xbox console competition in Japan. Policymakers raised concerns last week to Biden officials, saying Sony's business practices in its native Japan are blocking U.S. companies from competing in that country's gaming market and could be running afoul of U.S.-Japan trade deals.
Well, first off, I don't know what they think they're doing asking Biden to get anything done. You have better chances of Star Citizen being finished in the next 10 years than you do seeing Biden get anything done. I mean, is it even worth investigating? Personally, I don't think so, because Xbox never stood a chance in Japan. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the Japanese company did indeed do a lot of things behind the scenes to ensure that their Japanese companies dominate in their own country. And I think looking into it would be a waste of time, because even if you could correct what is wrong, I still don't think Xbox would stand a chance. But you cannot deny it is absolutely hilarious to see Sony go from being the ones pointing the finger to now being the ones investigated.
The unexpected pressure became public on Thursday when Senator Mario Cantwell Dewash pressed U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai on it during a trade hearing. 10 members of the House also sent 2 letters on Thursday to Tai and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, urging action. Today we write to bring to your attention the imbalanced Japanese video game market, which we are concerned may be a result of a discriminatory trade practice that could violate the spirit of the US-Japan Digital Trade Agreement, states one of the letters signed by 4 Republicans from the House, including Carol Miller and Mike Carey. The Republican letter alleges that Sony PlayStation has 98% of the high-end console market in Japan, signs deals designed to keep hit Japanese games from Microsoft's Xbox, and says such moves may violate Japan's antitrust laws. The Japanese government's effective policy of non-prosecution appears to be a serious barrier to U.S. exports, with real impacts for Microsoft and the many U.S. game developers and publishers that sell globally but see their earnings in Japan depressed by these practices, the letter continues. A letter to Taya Raimondo from 6 Democratic lawmakers from Washington state, where Microsoft is based, covers similar ground. Article 8 of the 2019 U.S.-Japan Digital Trade Agreement calls for the countries to enable non-discriminatory treatment of digital products, which would include games. It's less clear if it would also pertain to game consoles. Sony has had a steep advantage over Xbox in Japan for decades, though the secrecy around gaming contracts obscures the underlying causes. Sony does occasionally secure major platform exclusives, as with Square Enix's Final Fantasy XVI, a Japanese-made game expected to be big with Japanese and global audiences, and that's only slated for PlayStation, no Xbox. But Japan's console market is also not quite a two-horse race. Nintendo, excluded from the definition of high-end consoles cited by the policymakers, crushes Sony and Microsoft.
Jesus Christ, just imagine getting yourself investigated because you were such a little bitch. And most importantly, why did it take policymakers this long to notice that this is what Sony's been doing for decades? I've always hated the concept of exclusives because, honestly, let's be real with ourselves, they don't benefit the consumer. Even PlayStation fanboys can admit that. But I always understood it was just business. And that is what I expected Sony themselves to understand because, well, it's their practice. Until they showed their utter hypocrisy by trying to stop Microsoft from securing exclusives, which is what all of this is about. Let's not kid ourselves. Sony doesn't want Microsoft to have exclusives that big because they know the impact it will have on them. And just taking a look at a game like Final Fantasy XVI, isn't that obvious? That is a huge IP, especially in Japan, where you can only play it on one console. And this doesn't just go for Final Fantasy. We're talking about a lot of other Japanese games that never make it to Xbox. Now, obviously, we're just looking at a bunch of lobbyists fighting each other, so all we're really seeing is corruption versus corruption. However, the one thing I didn't expect to see was Sony come under scrutiny after all of this. And Destin was the one who called it. He knew this is what would happen. Obviously, this investigation will go nowhere because you can't just exclude Nintendo. Sony most certainly does not have a monopoly in the Japanese market. However, that doesn't mean that there's a possibility they abused antitrust laws in Japan. And if they are found guilty of doing so, then yeah, Sony could face some sort of repercussion. And then again, we are talking about a Japanese company in Japan, so the most they'll probably get is a slap on the wrist. Hell, chances are you probably won't even get an investigation. However, it's not out of the realm of possibility, and if Sony does get investigated and they're found guilty, oh my god, it will be hilarious. Because Sony went hard after Microsoft. They threw every lobbyist they could at them. They went to the CMA. They sat down with regulators and fed them a bunch of bullshit. All while Microsoft was trying to cut a deal with Sony to lessen the tension. But no, remember what Jim Ryan said? I don't want a deal, I just want to block your merger. Famous last words for the Karen of Sony. Because Microsoft said, hey, you may be corrupt, but you ain't as corrupt as us. You want to waste our time and our money? Go ahead, we got more of it than you do. The US company hitting the Japanese company in their own home. Oof. And Microsoft kept their mouths shut for years. I mean, years. So if they want to make Sony's life miserable for the next couple of months, I'm all for it. I really don't care. This is the hill Sony chose to die on. This was worth all of their resources and not a proper port of The Last of Us on PC. And now the worst part is they've probably made one of the worst enemies out of Microsoft, which is a company I wouldn't want to mess with, because up to this point, Microsoft didn't have anyone investigate Sony for any of this. Yet the minute they tried tried for once in years to start competing by getting IPs, Sony tried getting it stopped. I don't know how the relationship between these two companies was before all of this, but I can assure you it's in shambles now. Instead of just signing the goddamn deal, they had to continue pressing on this matter. They couldn't let it go. And now it's going to backfire on them twice as hard. This isn't the type of subject you take a side on. All you can really do is sit back and observe the chaos. There's not much Microsoft has left to do to finally acquire Activision. So far, we've got more regulators approving than disapproving of this merger, and Sony's cry for help isn't getting them anywhere. It's all been a giant waste of time and my tax dollars. But if the end results are that Sony gets in trouble for all of this at the end of the day, then you know what? I don't actually mind being a taxpayer. This long super gay ass journey is finally coming to an end, and if you want to be there to see it to the end with me, then you should consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing if you so choose to. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one.
If I knew that I didn't wait on this story, Tango Plays would have made a video roasting me for about 30 minutes.
You're goddamn right.